Hey everybody, welcome to training module 12, experiencing grief. Just jump right in. Roman numeral 1, grieving is Christian. One of the things you don't want to convey to your care receiver when they're going through grief is that there's something wrong with it. If you're like, hey, cheer up, whatever, you definitely don't ever do that. Grief is absolutely Christian. You think about, I guess the ultimate example, and just the long and the short of it, is Jesus modeled that for us. He talked about the death of his dear friend Lazarus, and Jesus wept, and so it's very much in line with our beliefs. It's absolutely Christian to grieve. So make sure you always have that kind of in your mind that's part of the process. Everything that we're going through here is just part of a process. So Roman numeral 2, life our own grief. This is really important. For me personally, doing ministry, going back to my sources of hurt, former sources of hurt, is one of the most powerful things I could do to minister to other people. Because if they know you've been through it, there's a certain kind of authority that you have, and you've come through it okay. Again, it's a way that God can use things where you've been hurt in the past but are now healed, and you can use those things now to serve others. It's extremely powerful. Now, one of the things I'll caution you on is, though, don't make it about your story. Where it's like, oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. When my dad died, I blah blah. Don't do that. Use information or wisdom from your experience, and use it to minister to your care receiver. But don't make it about your story. Also, don't project onto their story things that might be relevant to you. In other words, I'll give you an example of, like, maybe if someone felt really guilty about their mom passing away and they hadn't made amends with them, and then as a Stephen minister, you're kind of projecting that onto your care receiver. Like, do you feel really guilty right now because of all the things you didn't get to do? And don't do that. Let the person tell their story. Don't project onto it. Be very sensitive to where you're at in this. If you've had some what we usually refer to as squishy spots, and where you start to feel really vulnerable, or maybe you've not got all your healing done there, and then you start to lose some perspective in your caregiving, okay? Make sure you don't over-identify. Remember the pit that they described with the 4 people, and you want to grieve with them, but not over-identify with them, where you're getting down to the pit with them, and you're losing perspective, where you're mourning as much as they are, and that's not healthy. You're not ministering to them at that point. Okay, so make sure that you keep all these different things in perspective. All right, one of the things we're going to do in class is on Focus Note 3, we're going to make our own grief timeline. Each of you is going to go through and describe some of the major events in your life that have caused you grief. And this is a very healthy part of the process. This is going to help you to be aware of how God's going to use these events to minister to others. So if you want to start on those earlier, before class, that's great, but we're going to do mostly in class. We're going to go through that timeline and give you some time to work on that in class. The Roman numeral 3, what can cause grief? We can discuss that. It's sometimes, it's not even a major loss. It's maybe a series of smaller losses, that can add up, that can lead to grief. One of the things to keep an eye out for, just in general, is if a person has a disproportionately large reaction to a small loss, that could mean there is some unresolved grief below the surface. In general, anytime a reaction is a huge reaction to something that shouldn't be that big, usually there's something to it, and it's something that we need to unpack a little bit more. We're going to go through a brainstorming exercise about loss, and just in terms of what are the different kinds of loss, all the different kinds of loss we can think about. We're going to do that in class. It's going to be kind of a brainstorming. That's Focus Note 5 that we're going to work on. All right, principles in caring for grieving people. Roman numeral number 4. To date, we've gone through a lot of really good information about grieving. So this would be I'm going to encourage you to kind of review some of the different things. For instance, review feelings that we've discussed about the feelings of going through grief. The 4 steps in dealing with feelings. Focus on number 6. If you recall, to recognize, accept, express, and trust. You might want to. It might be helpful to review the safe house once again. Discuss letting go of grief. How the final loss of grief can be grief itself. Review crisis. The model we just studied a couple of modules ago, I believe. It was the progression of a crisis, the equilibrium, the precipitating event, disequilibrium, and so forth. So again, this is really helpful to review as you go into as you're dealing with somebody who has gone through this process and is in the middle of grieving. All right, let's talk about the different stages of grief and how to care for your care receiver during each one. This is Roman numeral 5. Stage 1, they're going to be in shock. Pure and simple. Just they're a state of shock. So what you can do is be present. Just be there with them. Okay. You're not setting any expectations on them. You're just saying, you're really setting the tone for the chorus of, I'm here with you. Whatever was going to happen, I'm here with you, and we're going to go through this together. And it's important that they sense that and they feel that. And it may feel like you're not really doing that much, but just being there is a huge thing at the time. So, and again, this is at a time where after all the initial kind of attention this person gets, a lot of people are going to kind of fall away, unfortunately. And that's just kind of the nature of things. So to know that you're there and you're not leaving is a very powerful thing. One of the things you got to keep in mind too is accept the care receiver wherever they're at, because they're going to be very emotional at different times. They may be, quite frankly, a little unpleasant sometimes. Being around someone who's really sad or depressed or possibly angry, but you're not telling them don't be like that. You're just saying, I'm here wherever you are, I accept you. If they're in denial, don't challenge it. This is a very kind of, the initial stage is just kind of a hands-off stage. I'm here to be with you. We're not trying to get them to react in a certain way or stop doing whatever. It's just you're really there just supporting them and accepting them. Really important to listen. Okay, listen to what they have to say. Grieve with them. It's okay for you to express your grief too with them and what's going on with them. Let them make decisions. Don't take over their life and say, no, you can't do that, and become someone who takes over all their decision making. That's not helpful. Okay, but on the other hand, help them to avoid rash decisions. When someone is going through a major crisis, they can make some horrible decisions that will have long-lasting effects, often financial. So make sure that you're with them. That's okay there to help them to avoid making major decisions. Stage 2, we call that the recoil stage, and this can last for a year or more. During this time, there's some very intense feelings. During this stage, your care receiver will especially need the care you can provide, including the following kinds of care. 1, be available. Again, you may need to be available a little more often than usual. Maybe they need some meetings in between your regularly scheduled meetings. Maybe they need some telecare, like we talked about before, it's on the phone. During this time, stage 2, be aware of special dates, anniversaries, birthdays, holidays, the date of the death, or the event. Make sure you're aware of those things. Encourage emotional expression during this time. Let them know that it's okay to be emotional, to let that out. That's a healthy part of the process. Sometimes people need just permission to let it all out. And so make sure in that time you say it's okay to let it go and to express your emotions. Offer distinctively Christian resources, prayer. Offer them scripture that could be comforting. If they feel guilty about anything regarding the death of the individual or the grief they're going through, allow them to confess their sins, and ask for forgiveness. Pray with them. Pray for them. Give them, again, it's distinctly Christian care. 5. I really like this one. Guard against platitudes. Well, God's in control of everything. Tomorrow's a new day. I know how you feel. God only takes the good. And while well intentioned, I can't. I really have a thing with those, because it's making. I don't know why I don't like them so much, but they're just things that sound trite, and they sound pandering. They don't work. Just talk very real to them, or mostly just listen. But don't try to wrap it up in a nice, neat little bow so they feel good, because those don't work, and they might actually be seen as insulting in some cases. So don't do that. Mobilize support if you need to. Get a team around them. Maybe some other ministry folks that need to kind of come in and help out for certain things, but get a team around them. Then we enter into stage 3, which is the rebuilding stage. Continue your caregiving, continue to support your care receiver. Encourage new social relationships. Hey, maybe now it's time for you to get out and develop a new circle of friends, or re-engage old friends. But encourage them not to, now that a lot of their healing is done, ideally, that they're going to go out there. And finally, keep your ear tuned. Listen for little things that if they're kind of if they're going through something, that it might indicate that they're in a bad spot, for you to kind of walk them through it again. So that really ends our study on grief. It was kind of fast and furious with a lot of information, but this is one of the, I love this section. It's one that where you can really serve people the best, and I look forward to discussing this a little bit more and unpacking a little more in class. So I will see you in class this week.